You're 1 week away from your dream wedding. 200 guests, the perfect dress, the man you love waiting at the altar. But as you walk past your parents' room, you hear voices that make your blood run cold. She'll be standing up there like the pathetic failure she's always been, my mother hissed. Then came my sister Chloe's voice, dripping with venom. The plan is simple. Mom, I spill the heavy red Cabernet, right when she reaches the altar. While I pretend to help wipe it off, I rip the back seam wide open. She'll be standing there, stained and exposed, looking like the clumsy, trashy failure she is in front of the entire Hamptons elite. It wasn't a prank. It was a career-ending execution. Before we dive into how I turned their nightmare back on them, drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. I didn't scream. I didn't storm into the room and demand an explanation. I didn't even cry. Instead, I stood in that hallway, perfectly still, feeling the cold seep into my bones. It wasn't the shock of the betrayal that froze me, it was the familiarity of it. For 28 years, I had been the family's utility player necessary for the lights to stay on, but invisible until something broke. I was the glass child. You look right through a glass child to see the shiny, golden things behind them. You don't notice the glass until it shatters and cuts you. I walked quietly to my room and locked the door. The heavy click of the latch sounded like a gavel coming down. I leaned against the wood and looked around the guest suite. It was opulent, tasteful, and expensive. My parents were strutting around this Hamptons estate like they were royalty holding court, telling everyone it was a gift from a generous business associate of my father's. That was a lie. I knew it was a lie, because I was the associate. 6 months ago, my father, David, had called me in a panic. His credit cards were maxed out, his liquidity was gone, and he was terrified of looking like a failure in front of his wealthy friends. He needed a venue for the wedding week that screamed old money. I didn't ask questions. I just set up a shell corporation, routed the funds, and paid the $50,000 deposit anonymously. I told myself I was saving the family's reputation, but standing there in the dark, listening to the echo of my sister's venomous laughter, I finally admitted the truth. I wasn't saving their reputation. I was paying my rent. For years, I had been trapped in the fallacy of transactional love. I believed that affection was a commodity, something you could earn if you just provided enough value. If I fixed their problems, if I paid off my father's gambling debts without telling my mother, if I edited Chloe's captions so she sounded literate, if I made myself indispensable, then surely, eventually, I would purchase my right to be loved. I treated my place in this family like a subscription service I was terrified to let expire. I thought if I just kept paying the premiums in money, in silence, in dignity, they wouldn't cancel me. But tonight, the invoice had come due, and the cost was my public destruction. They didn't want my help, they wanted my humiliation. They were happy to take the $50,000 for the venue, and then plan to strip me naked in the middle of it. I walked over to the mirror. The woman staring back wasn't the mousy freelance editor they thought they knew. That woman was a costume I wore to make them feel comfortable. The real Rachel owned Apex Media. The real Rachel had just negotiated a $25 million acquisition offer. The real Rachel was done paying for a seat at a table where she was on the menu. I sat down on the edge of the bed. The sadness evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. If they wanted to treat our relationship like a transaction, fine. I was about to close the account. I sat down at my desk, the one my mother always complained took up too much space in the guest room. She saw clutter. I saw a command center. I opened my laptop, the screen illuminating my face in the dark room. It was time to look at the books. I logged into the secure admin portal of Apex Media. To the world, Apex was a titan, a digital talent agency representing the top influencers on the East Coast. To my family, it was just a name they heard on the news, something far too big for their freelance editor daughter to understand. They had no idea that I was the founder, the majority shareholder, and the hand on the tiller. I navigated to the talent roster and pulled up Chloe's profile. There she was, smiling that practiced, camera-ready smile. She believed a top scout from New York had discovered her at a brunch spot 2 years ago. She believed her meteoric rise, her brand deals, her sudden verification, it was all due to her natural charisma. She didn't know I had instructed my team to sign her. I had built her platform algorithm by algorithm, smoothing her path, burying her scandals, and buying her bot-free engagement. I had manufactured her stardom to give her something of her own, hoping it would make her happy enough to be kind. I was wrong. I moved my cursor to the contract status. Active. Lucrative. Essential to her lifestyle. I clicked the edit button and changed the status to pending termination. I didn't execute it yet. I wanted the system to be ready. This wasn't petty revenge, it was a corporate restructuring. I was cutting a non-performing asset, but I wasn't done. The conversation in the hallway had mentioned money using the rest of the wedding fund. I needed to see exactly what they meant. I switched tabs to the private banking portal. My grandfather had left a trust fund, a small nest egg meant for my business startup expenses. I hadn't touched it, preferring to build Apex on my own revenue, keeping that money as a safety net. I pulled up the statement and froze. The balance should have been $95,000. It was zero. My breath hitched. I clicked on the transaction history, scrolling back. 6 months ago, a single wire transfer had drained the account. I pulled up the authorization document. There, at the bottom, were the signatures, Lisa and David, my parents. They hadn't just signed their names as witnesses, they had forged my signature as the beneficiary. The loops on the R were too wide, the slant too aggressive. It was a clumsy, desperate forgery, likely executed in a panic to cover the debts they were hiding from their country club friends. The coldness in my chest spread to my fingertips. This wasn't just bad parenting anymore. This wasn't just toxic favoritism or emotional abuse. This was a felony. They had looked at the money my grandfather left for my future and decided it was theirs to steal. They had robbed me to fund the very lifestyle they used to mock me. I closed the laptop. The silence in the room felt heavy, charged with a new, dangerous energy. I wasn't just the bride they were planning to humiliate. I was the victim of a 6-figure financial crime, and I was the CEO who held the kill switch to their golden child's career. They wanted a show? I would give them a show, but it wouldn't be the one they rehearsed. The rehearsal dinner the next evening was less of a celebration and more of a coronation for Chloe. She sat at the head of the table at the exclusive Hamptons Bistro, holding court while I spent the evening running errands like a glorified personal assistant. "Rachel, my train is bunched up." "Fix it," Chloe snapped, not even looking at me as she sipped her champagne. "Rachel, go check on the appetizers. These aren't the ones I ordered," my mother added, waving a manicured hand in my direction. "And try to look a little more pleasant. You're ruining the aesthetic." I did as I was told. I smoothed the silk. I checked the menu. I faded into the background, just as I had been trained to do. But every time they laughed, every time my father made a toast to the daughter who actually made something of herself, the rage in my chest grew hotter. It wanted to scream. It wanted to flip the table, throw the evidence in their faces, and watch them choke on their arrogance. I stepped out onto the deck, overlooking the ocean to breathe. The salt air was cold, biting. I gripped the railing until my knuckles turned white. This was the hardest part. Not the discovery, not the planning, but the waiting. The urge to react is a biological instinct, fight or flight. But I was choosing a third option, freeze them out. There is a specific kind of power that comes from the dignity of silence. We often mistake loudness for strength, thinking that the person yelling is the one in control. But true power is quiet. It's the ability to possess the knowledge that will destroy your enemy, and yet sit across from them, breaking bread, without a single tremor in your hand. If I screamed now, I would just be the jealous, crazy sister causing a scene. I would give them the narrative they wanted, that I was unstable. But by holding back, by letting them believe they were safe, I was ensuring their destruction would be absolute. Silence isn't passivity. It's the disciplined accumulation of ammunition. I wasn't swallowing my anger. I was refining it into fuel. I took a deep breath, let the cold air settle the fire in my veins, and walked back inside. It was time to assemble the war council. Later that night, in the quiet of the guest cottage, I met with Matthew and Grandma Eleanor. I didn't waste time with preamble. I laid the laptop on the coffee table and opened the files. I showed them the forgery. I played the recording of the wine and rip plot. Matthew went pale. He was a kind man, a man who believed in the best of people, and seeing the raw malice of my family broke something in him. He looked at me, his eyes wide with horror. They were going to strip you? In front of everyone? They still are, I said calmly. Or they're going to try. Grandma Eleanor was different. She didn't look horrified. She looked lethal. She put on her reading glasses, examined the bank statements, and then looked at the signatures. David, she whispered, her voice shaking not with age, but with fury. My own son, stealing from his daughter. She looked up at me, her eyes steel hard. Do it, Rachel. Burn it down. I will not let them walk away from this. I need you both to trust me, I said. Tomorrow is going to be chaos. You can't intervene until I give the signal. You have to let it happen. Matthew grabbed my hand, squeezing it tight. I'm with you, whatever you need. Good, I said, closing the laptop. Because tomorrow, we aren't attending a wedding, we're attending a funeral for their reputation. The wedding ceremony was a masterclass in tension. The estate was breathtaking, the flowers were perfect, and the guests were oblivious. They thought the electricity in the air was anticipation. I knew it was the calm before the storm. At the reception, the head table was set like a stage. My parents were beaming, playing the role of the proud, benevolent benefactors. Chloe was buzzing around, her eyes constantly darting to the back of my dress, checking the seam. She held a glass of heavy, dark red wine, like a weapon. As the speeches began, I saw her move. It was time. Chloe approached the head table, feigning a stumble. Oh! She cried out, her voice theatrically surprised. The wineglass tipped. The dark liquid arched through the air. It hit me square in the chest. The crowd gasped. My mother's hand flew to her mouth in a performance worthy of an Oscar. Oh no! Rachel! Let me help! Chloe shouted, lunging forward with a napkin. Her hand didn't go for the stain. It went straight for the back of my dress. She grabbed the fabric near the zipper and yanked. This was the moment. The moment I would be stripped. The moment I would be shamed. But the fabric held. I had taken the dress to a theatrical costumer 3 days ago. The seams were reinforced with industrial nylon stitching. The zipper was locked. Chloe pulled again, panic flashing in her eyes. The dress didn't budge. I looked down at her, wine dripping from my bodice, my face calm. Elena, the wedding planner, stepped out from the shadows. She wasn't carrying a towel, she was carrying a microphone. Thank you, Chloe, I said, my voice amplified, cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. But I don't think that will be necessary. I took the microphone from Elena. Chloe froze, her hand still gripping my dress. I gently removed her fingers. One by one. Actually, I continued, turning to the room. Since we have everyone's attention, there's a small change to the program. I nodded to the AV booth. The massive projection screens behind the head table flickered. The slideshow of happy memories my parents had prepared vanished. In its place, a black screen appeared. Then, a logo faded in. Bold, red letters. Apex Media. A ripple of confusion went through the room. The younger guests recognized it immediately. Apex was the biggest name in the influencer game. Most of you know me as a freelance editor, I said. What you don't know is that for the past 5 years, I have been the founder and CEO of Apex Media. I looked at Chloe, her face was draining of color. And as the CEO, I said, my voice hardening, I have to make difficult personnel decisions. On the screen, a familiar profile appeared. Chloe's Instagram, her TikTok, her brand partnerships, the dashboard was live. Chloe, I said, I accept your resignation. I pressed a button on the remote in my hand. On the giant screen, the mouse cursor moved to the delete account button. Click, Chloe screamed. No, what are you doing? The screen refreshed. Account not found. I clicked again. Her TikTok, gone. Her brand deals, terminated. Live, in front of 200 people, her digital existence was being erased. But that's not all, I said, turning to my parents. Lisa and David were staring at me, their mouths agape. We need to talk about the budget. The screen changed again. This time, it wasn't social media. It was a bank statement. A trust fund statement. $95,000, I read aloud. Stolen from the trust my grandfather left me, forged signatures, wire fraud. The document zoomed in on the signatures, David and Lisa. The date of the transfer. You needed me to fail, I said to them, my voice trembling with controlled rage. You needed me to be the screw-up so Chloe could be the star. You stole my future to pay for her vanity. You made me the scapegoat to protect your golden child. But the scapegoat just bought the farm. The room was dead silent. You could hear the ocean crashing in the distance. The elite of the Hamptons, the investors, the partners, the socialites, were staring at my parents, not with pity, but with disgust. The mask had slipped. The old money facade was gone. They were just thieves in expensive clothes. Get out, I said. All of you. The aftermath wasn't loud. It was the suffocating quiet of a room where all the air had been sucked out. Chloe was staring at her phone, tapping the screen frantically, but it was just a brick of glass and metal now. Her digital kingdom, the only thing she truly loved, was gone. She looked up at me, her face a mask of mascara and terror, realizing that without her platform, she was just a girl in a white dress at someone else's wedding. My parents looked toward the guests, the investors, the partners, the Hamptons elite they had spent a lifetime trying to impress. But no one looked back. People were turning away, checking their watches, signaling for their cars. Social death is quieter than physical death, but it smells the same. Grandma Eleanor stood up. She didn't use the microphone, she didn't need to. She walked over to my father, her cane clicking rhythmically against the floor. David, she said, her voice carrying the weight of a final judgment. You stole from my granddaughter to fund your vanity. You are no longer my son. You are a bad investment, and I am liquidating my assets. She turned her back on him. It was the final seal on their ruin. Matthew stepped forward, wrapping his arm around my waist. He didn't say a word to them. He just guided me toward the exit. We didn't run. We didn't hurry. We walked past the wreckage of my family with the steady, unhurried pace of people who had nothing left to prove. I didn't look back. You don't look back at a burning building when you're the one who lit the match. The transition to my new life wasn't marked by a calendar, but by the quality of the silence. The noise of their demands, their criticism, their constant need for my utility, it was all gone. I sat on the balcony of my own home, not a rental, but mine. The morning sun was hitting the water, turning the ocean into a sheet of diamonds. I held a cup of coffee, feeling the warmth seep into my hands. My phone buzzed on the table. I glanced at the screen. Mom. Then it buzzed again. Chloe. They were calling. Of course they were. The shock had worn off. And now came the bargaining. They wanted to negotiate. They wanted to explain. They wanted to know if the kill switch could be reversed. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel sadness. I felt like a CEO looking at a spam email. I picked up the phone. I didn't answer. I pressed block. Then I pressed it again. And again. I opened my laptop. The dashboard for Apex Media filled the screen. The metrics were green. The acquisition offer was finalized. My empire was thriving. I wasn't the silent daughter anymore. I wasn't the fixer, the bank, or the scapegoat. I was the empress of my own life. And the view from the throne was spectacular. If you've ever had to cut off a toxic family member to save your own sanity, share this story. You never know who needs to hear that it's okay to choose yourself. Hit that subscribe button. And I'll see you in the next one.